Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I am Solaris Blue Ribbon, and my excellent guest tonight is Captain Henry Kroll. And Henry, I appreciate you being on tonight. I know it was you were having some computer issues, so I'm really glad you were able to join us.
I'm glad to be back. So, anyway, we were discussing the king of the planet Nibiru. His name is King Anu, and he was here 3,000 years ago, according to Zachariah Sitchin, anyway. But they had to entertain these folks when they arrived here. They had dancing and music and acrobats and juggling and that sort of thing. And then they had served them food on giant gold platters that were 3 feet long. The plates were like gold, solid gold, 3 feet long. And anyway, this particular book that he wrote had to do with all the gold that they mine in South America. And they had to build temples for them, and they all had high ceilings, 20, 30 foot, for them to sleep out of the weather, I guess, keep out of the rain. And they covered these temples with gold sheeting, and they had 2-millimeter holes drilled in the andesite in the granite stones, and they nailed this gold plating over these temples. At Cusco and Pumapuco and Tiwanaku, they had gold plating on because you could see the holes in the stone. They're still there, and it's heavy. It's really hard stone, like andesite and granite. And one archaeologist found one of the gold plates, and it had like 6 penny nails, very small nails, still in it, all made of gold, that had been used to cover one of the temples. Mm-hmm. But some worldwide cataclysm just shook the earth so bad that it scattered the blocks of the temples are made out of it in Pumapuco and Tiwanaku, just scattered them like giant Legos over the landscape. And then at one point in time, they were buried in a mud and water. And then, of course, the wind or water washed all the mud away. So they have this kind of a pink stain on the stones, you'll notice. Or if you go on YouTube and look at some of the information about those cities there, and they're at 10,000 foot altitude. Well, I don't believe that when they were built that they were at 10,000 foot. Lake Titicaca could have been much lower. It's now 10,000 foot, and those cities are like 12,000 feet altitude currently, but they could have been close to sea level at one time. And in my book, Cosmological Ice Ages, we use an online computer and bounce the moon off the northern hemisphere, creating the Arctic Ocean. And the data that came back, it would depress Earth 5 kilometers and bounce back up to 1.3 kilometers. And the force was transmitted through the Earth, and it raised up the entire continent of Antarctica several thousand feet. It now has an average altitude of 7,000 feet. The continent of Antarctica is very tall, very high. That's why there's so much ice on it. And now it's separated it from South America at that time, 11,722 years ago. But anyway, it destroyed all their gold mining operations and knocked the temples down. But they still, and all the gold sheeting, of course, was robbed by the locals and over the last couple thousand years. So anyway, that's what we think that happened there.
So Zachariah, he's in an awful lot of trouble if he's not right about his data, right? A lot of people go after. I mean, go ahead.
There's a lot of gold left there, and in his writings, they talk about the gold on the surface in some of the rivers near the Panama Canal, the big river there, and the gravel is 300 feet deep. So if you could get down to the bottom some way, below all that gravel, you'd get tremendous amounts of gold yet in some of the rivers there in South America. And I used to be a gold miner, and I still may go on a prospecting trip this winter to Arizona.
Nice, that's great.
We'll see what happens.
You should go.
I've dreamed up a new way to get nuggets.
Did you?
Small ones.
That sounds good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of fun.
You got to do a lot of work on your hands and knees,
Well, but if you're looking for gold and you succeed, that's, maybe it's worth it.
It's where you find it. It's really weird, It's just amazing stuff. it's hard to recognize the ore bodies and the deposits unless you've had a lot of experience. And then
Right. Do you
it's
use
really an eye opener.
Right. Do you use a metal detector?
I have, yeah. The one I have is very small though.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 1-inch diameter search coil on it. But anyway, that gold has been very important throughout the millennia. They're just from the beginning of time, and it's also used as a food. And I wrote a book on that 20-some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they burn it into this white powder, and the atoms of the gold are actually combined. You can do it with a stun gun. You can hold a regular stun gun on a small gold nugget, and it'll reduce it into a white powder. And there's many ways of turning it into the ORM state. It's called orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. It's two atoms of gold combined with all the protons in the center. And they're like little magnets of the same polarity, so they kind of push apart. So you're dealing with a particle that has weak atomic forces. If you put it out in bright sunlight, it'll catch fire and burn. And it's very light, has anti-gravity properties because the electrons pair up in orbit in opposite directions around the nucleus. And if you could see one, it looked like a small galaxy or the planet Saturn. But anyway, because of their physical shape, they repel magnetic fields. If you hold a magnet above this stuff, it reproduces the magnetic field exactly and pushes away from it. It's like a monopole magnetic generator. It magnetically resonates so that it can be considered to be a room temperature superconductor.
Mm-hmm.
In the human body, the mitochondria within our cells are able to rearrange these atoms for complete cell division and thereby prolong the human life. The technology has been around for many thousands of years, but it's been kept secret and used by the pharaohs and the priests. And they use alkaline water in the spring water to take these gold and platinum group atoms and other trace minerals out of the soil. And it's the same process that plants use, and you eat the plants that are grown on soil, but the stuff we buy in the supermarket has been grown on the same soil for almost 200 years, and it lacks all the trace minerals and the ORMs. You got to have these orbitally rearranged atoms. You just type that into YouTube, and you can learn a few things about it. There's a guy, David Hudson, has the patents on the ORMs. He got 22 patents on it. General Electric helped him get the patents. And I put recipes that I got from Pfizer Pharmaceutical in my book, Philosopher's Stone, How to Make It.
Mm-hmm.
You can take it out of limestone, seawater, Dead Sea salt, Great Salt Lake precipitate, granite powder, anything. Many items carry gold and platinum group metals in the ORM state. But you can't get the metal out of there because they're in this orbitally rearranged monatomic state.
Mm-hmm.
And the technology is worth learning, and it can save your life. It cures cancer, and terminally ill patients, they can mix it with distilled water, inject it in a vein, and they'll get better or get well, completely cured in about a month or so, because it allows the mitochondria to furnish enough energy for complete cell division. It rebuilds your DNA and winds it up a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, aging is loss of body cells, and it's because the DNA unravels over time. When you're first conceived, you have 50 base pairs per turn, and the DNA is wound up very tight, and the cells divide very quickly. And when you're born, you have 25 base pairs per turn of DNA. As it unravels, it slows the cell reproduction rate down. At age 20, you have about 20 base pairs per turn. At age 50, you're down to 5. And you really start losing body cells after that, after age 50.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to stop the aging process, you need to feed the mitochondria so that they can wind the DNA up tighter with more energy. You just need more boost of energy to the cells.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the entire human body doesn't function as well after 50 because your digestive system isn't as effective. if you aren't getting the proper nutrients, and some people age much quicker than others because of various malfunctioning parts of their body.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, if you can just get that into the mitochondria some way, then they can do their job and furnish energy for the main cells, and they replicate their DNA along with the human DNA. So
Right.
they're like little alien cells, and you inherit them from your mother. You've got 3 or 4 in each of your human cells that their job is just to metabolize the food, you see.
Mm-hmm.
They may have other jobs, but we don't know what it is. Or our science is, a little on the dark on a lot of this stuff. Things that I'm telling you right now, they don't know this.
That's true. It's alchemy.
It is alchemy, but you're dealing with a particle that has weak atomic forces because the protons are like little magnets,
Mm-hmm.
and the nucleus is much larger, and they push apart. So you can pull protons out of there with magnetic frequency, and that's what they do. They have little magnetic pulses that they are able to manipulate these atoms into proper elements for complete cell division,
Mm-hmm.
and get more energy to the main cells.
Do you still make your own monoatomic gold? I know you were doing that for a while. Are you still doing it or no?
Oh yeah, it's no problem. You just need a food grade alkaline, a pH meter, rubber gloves, some goggles, something to take it out of. You're not making it; you're taking it out of source items. Wherever you've had an ocean at one time and the seawater evaporated, like in the Middle East or Phoenix, Arizona, areas, or even Great Salt Lake precipitate's very rich in it,
Mm-hmm.
and magnesium. But anyway, the spring waters in those areas in the deserts are already alkaline. So the priests or the pharaohs or the people that knew this technology, they could take some of the dirt and boil it in the spring water and keep adding water because the water boils away. They boil it for 5 days or so. After 5 or 6 days, they can have a clear liquid. You can't see anything in it. You just throw the dirt away and pour this liquid out. And they add acid to the liquid to lower the pH because you had to add water, alkaline water, it became a deadly poison after concentrating the water for 5 days. So you don't want to drink it and all your hair would fall out. You might die, get deadly sick, unless you lowered the pH down with acid or vinegar of some kind. You use vinegar or wine possibly. Once the pH is normal, then you could go ahead and you could take this into your body. And that was taking God's inner light into your body.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Hebrew words for this in ancient times, but it was kept secret from the common man. They didn't understand it. And whether or not the alchemists themselves understood the technology, the shape of the particles, etc., is debatable. But I came about it by doing tests on various complex gold ores over a period of 15 years. My dad had a gold mine, and eventually I kind of figured out what was going on and how you get more recovery from these by transmuting the ore atoms back into the metal.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing it with ball mills in Bandon and Gold Beach, Oregon, and they use lye and potash. They dissolve the minerals out of the material and smack it with these steel balls over a period of time. And energy is never lost. It actually imparting electrons to these combined atoms to separate them back into the metallic form.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you have a conservation of energy law. You're smacking them with steel balls over a period of hours, and it actually get more recovery, more gold out of these materials after you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're separating these complex atoms. Well, there's other ways of figuring it out. I had an electron beam test done where you actually melt these complex ores that you can't get much recovery out of them for gold or platinum. You melt it with electron beams. They have a little box, they test units. They have them up to 5 metric tons, but you put your sample in a container and fill it with argon gas so it don't oxidize, and then you melt it with these old electron TV picture tube guns. They're very similar, into a lump of glass, and that just imparts electrons to these complex combined atoms, and separates them into the metallic form. And you get up to 4 to 6 times more gold or platinum out of these ores. So anyway, technology was invented by in Germany for that electron beam furnace, and they have a bigger unit. Hitachi company in Japan stole the patent, and they had one on the island of Molokai in Hawaii. They were using to melt the black sands there, volcanic sand, to have some platinum and gold in it, and they're transmuting them back into the metal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, David Hudson, he's the one who got the patents on this material. But, you know, it's been the history I put in the book as Philosopher's Stone, the title of the book, but it's the history and use of this stuff over the thousands of years. The Tibetan monks noticed that monkeys and dogs were licking these black rocks, and they started using this material, eating it, and they became enlightened and, you know, smarter, felt better. And what it was is rhodium. Rhodium in the monatomic state is a brain booster. And it goes into the brain, and it's used more efficiently for brain synapse, I think. It opens up the junctions between the brain cells to where the synapse can travel easier and it uses magnetics because of its physical shape. Of course, when you eat a lot of it, it goes through the blood-brain barrier and collects more in the brain than other places because it combines with fat. Mm-hmm. And then little minute magnetic forces push it out into the skull bones. So the skull contains more of this atoms than other sources. Even David Hudson is grinding up cows, sheep brains down there, grinding up the brains and the skulls and drying them out and then leaching out the metal out of them. And they're up to 5% platinum and gold in the cows and sheep brains. And he was doing a lot of tests in his laboratory down there over a period of years. He's a 4th-generation cotton farmer. It's been there for many years. They got 20,000 acres or more of cotton. And they can't grow anything on the desert there. It's west of Phoenix, near Caliente area. But he takes a 90-ton truckload of sulfuric acid, battery acid, and dumps it on 5 acres of land. Gets acid from Freeport and Moran and dumps it on 5 acres, and they disc it in, wait 4 or 5 years, and they can plant cotton on it because it lowers the pH so that the plants can grow. See, in order for plants to grow, they got to extrude alkaline to their roots to dissolve the minerals, and it's a slow process. So we use hydrochloric acid in our stomachs and other enzymes later, and that's a faster process. That's why we have a higher metabolism than plants. We can move around, and plants can't move very much. Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting.
Anyway, it's alkaline and acid deal, you know, and plants use alkaline. Well, it's the same process plants use. You boil certain things in alkaline water, and then you lower the pH down to where it's, and these molecules will tend to link up also and make a kind of a syrup. You can see this being done on YouTube now. I wrote the book a long time ago before YouTube was invented, but people are making it in their kitchens. Most of the stuff on there, they don't understand what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But there are a few that do, and I don't know if they're still up there right now, but one of them, if you type in how to make the Philosopher's Stone, all of that, what I just said, you can see a guy making it and the whole entire process. But it's got a background music, makes it hard to understand. But you can see it takes a while, a little time. Mm-hmm. It's alchemy, you know, but it's actually advanced science. It's only been around for many thousands of years. And if people could possibly keep your DNA and get it wound up and get enough energy for complete cell division, aging is a numbers game. You've got to replicate 6 million body cells every second to maintain your present form. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. Every second, you got 6 million body cells. And It's about 3 billion of them. Got to replicate every minute, rounding it off there. So, mitochondria are responsible for producing energy for cell division. If you don't feed them, they can't do their job. And the food that we get from these big mega farms and fertilize with chemical fertilizer, it doesn't have the necessary orbitally rearranged elements in there or the trace minerals.
Right.
So we keep getting sicker and dumber as time goes on. And
yeah,
people believe
really
that fluoride actually helps your teeth, but it doesn't. It's used as to quell riots in the prisons by Hitler.
Yeah.
And also, makes you stupider.
Well, take a look at society. I mean, there's definitely something going down. There's a dumbing down. I was going to ask you about the nanosilver. Have you done much research or experienced much with nanosilver?
Yeah, it works fine. You take a 9-volt battery and hook it up. I have a couple of them in a little box with a switch on it, and I have 2 pure silver wires, and just stick it in a glass of water for 15 minutes and turn it on, and it gets dark and discolored and tastes bad. If you go more than 15 minutes, I usually forget it in there for half an hour and makes it undrinkable.
Oh.
But it'll kill over 650 types of bacteria. It's very necessary, and it's good for the human body. The silver is very compatible with the human body. It's not a heavy metal. It's it's a nano silver. And when babies are born, they put silver nitrate on their eyes. They used to anyway, after birth, just to kill any foreign bacteria or anything on their eyes to keep them from going blind.
I don't know if they still do that anymore. That's very interesting.
Well, my mother was a public health nurse, and she delivered well over 200 babies. And she got a scholarship from college and went over to Edinburgh, Scotland, and then trained as a midwife in pediatrics and toured Europe in the 1920s and worked for the Kentucky Mountaineers in Kentucky. And I have a book with about 200 pictures of babies and their mothers that she had compiled while she worked in the 1930s. That was quite a while ago. She saw an ad in the newspaper where they needed the public health after working for the Frontier Nursing Service. They had nurses in 96 countries around the world in the 1930s.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. There's a map shows all of the different countries that they had nurses. This is the Frontier Nursing Service. They had a journal, her picture's on the cover. I have a copy of the old journal, 1934.
That's awesome.
And she saw an ad in the newspaper where they needed a public health nurse in Seldovia, Alaska. So she came there on a steamship, arrived in Seldovia, and met the outgoing nurse. And she wrote in her diary that she inherited the nurse's cat and the boyfriend.
Oh, interesting.
Which was my dad, of course.
That's pretty cute. That's nice that you have a nice historical benchmark of your mom and your dad and where they've been.
Well, I put 2 books together, one on her, and I didn't have to write it. I wrote 1 paragraph. She wrote it all herself on a typewriter. It's
nice.
100 with the pictures and everything, it's about 110 pages, something like that. And I can run off copies and sell it. And it's about her life. It's very interesting. And she was a very talented person. She played the piano very well, but she didn't have any lessons hardly. Her sister had lessons, and she would listen, and then she could sit down and play afterward just as well as her sister, and it made her irritated.
Oh, funny. Yeah, I can relate to that. That's cute. Yeah, I'm sure they'd be like completely appalled to see what's going on nowadays. Things have changed so drastically since 1934, that's for darn sure.
Yeah, she served as the public health nurse. She believed the government hard line because she was trained by the government nursing programs, They had to inoculate everybody for diphtheria and tetanus and whatever. And traveled between all the villages by boats. He would have to ride on the mailboat or by fishing vessel. And my dad had an airplane. He was the first person to ever land an airplane in this village of Seldovia. He came there from Valdez, and he'd been flying since 1929 or 1930. 1929, he captured 3 live wolverines. Nobody ever captured those animals before. And Doc Chase was advertising that he would pay $900 a piece for live wolverines, and he'd pay $800 for a mountain goat and a sheep, $600 for a sheep or something for zoos. They wanted them in the zoos in the Chicago and other places in the States. Mm-hmm. And nobody had ever captured a live wolverine. So, but he got 3 of them on his trap line. He was trapping on the other side of the Copper River from Cordova, about 20-mile hike across the ice in the wintertime. Strong winds, too. Unbelievable.
Oh, I bet.
It comes down the valley there, blows out to sea because the ocean water is warmer, and you got a constant wind of 80 miles an hour there most of the winter. Mm-hmm. On a good day. On a bad day, it's over 100, and it takes sand and rock, and that whole Copper River Delta is many, many square miles out into the ocean. That's all was taken out there by the wind. Mm-hmm. Because of the glaciers and the cold weather, interior Alaska is 40, 50, 60 below, and the ocean's, up a lot warmer around the freezing point, so. And then he'd hike. I had stories about him walking across there, and he could do 1-finger push-ups leaning into the wind, mm-hmm. and take his skis off. He couldn't carry his skis. He had to drill a hole in the front of his skis and drag them behind him with string, and the wind would flip them over and tangle the string up.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty wild. Yeah, those were different times.
He had a pack on. He had a heavy pack on, and he couldn't. He'd take a pack sometimes, and he put screw eyes in his skis and made a sled out of it. He put the Trapper Nelson pack board on his skis and lash it to the screw eyes, and he could drag that behind him and walk into the wind. Otherwise, he couldn't get across there.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
He leased some trapping cabins there that were Dirty Smiths, a Smith family, the old man that lived over there on the other side of the Copper River. And he had several line shacks. And when you run a trap line, you trap out one area, and then you go to another shack, and you move in there, and you trap out that area, and then you might have 3 or 4 line shacks, they call them. And then you come back to the first one, if you're trapping mink or marten or beaver or whatever. But anyway, he did a lot of adventurous things, and it was amazing that he survived. Mm-hmm. Of course, if he hadn't survived, I wouldn't be here either, so.
Right, isn't that interesting how that works?
You wouldn't be listening to this right now,
Well, I'm glad
you wouldn't be hearing these stories.
Right, well, it's nice to hear these stories, Henry.
Go
ahead.
Well, he discovered that in the winter, the river, as it freezes, the water recedes and it leaves caverns underneath the ice. So he got quite a bit of his mink and marten under the ice. He'd chop a hole in the river and crawl down in those ice caverns. Of course, if he broke through and you'd never find him, his body would wash out to sea eventually. Mm-hmm. But he survived. He'd set traps down in these ice caverns, and these animals are living on fish that they catch in the river, trout and other species, grayling or whatever, salmon.
Mm-hmm. Where did he learn to do that? Carcasses. So did he learn from his family?
He discovered. Well, he was from Wisconsin originally, and he lived with the Indians, and he spoke Nez Perce Indian. They adopted him. Mm-hmm. He spoke 7 languages eventually, but he had to survive. He just chopped holes in the ice and discovered there were caverns down there, and he just reasoned it out, I guess, that that's where the animals were. Mm-hmm. But he had other trap lines, and these wolverines kept messing with his traps. They'd set them off and steal the bait or whatever. So he laid awake one night to figure out how to catch them. And finally he got an old beaver hide, and he nailed it to a tree with a sat on the outside and put about 100 nails in it and clinched them over, old rusty ones. And he set 75 traps around the tree. He didn't bother covering them up because there's no point in it. They'd find him anyway. So Wolverine would go over there and avoid the traps and start gnawing on that hide, and his teeth would hit some of those nails, and they get really mad, and they forget all about the traps, and pretty soon they put a left hind toe in one of them, and that really makes them mad.
Mm-hmm.
And they start rolling around in the traps. Well, he'd find them, and they'd have traps on their head and their fur and all over covered with traps.
Oh, jeez.
He'd knock them out with a stick, take all the traps off and tie them up and put them on his pack and take them home. And they're like a bear, but they're tremendously strong, and they have a bite strong enough to just crush moose bones. I mean, they can just eat anything. They're very powerful jaws.
Yeah.
Many thousands of pounds pressure, per square inch on the jaws.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the first one he got, he didn't know what to do with it, so he put it in his woodshed. The next morning, it had gnawed a 2-inch diameter hole through the door. The door was made out of 1-inch lumber, but it had 2 layers of 1-inch lumber near the bottom. So he just nailed another board over the hole and went trapping. He'd come back in the evening, and it would be another 2-inch hole through that board, and nail another board over that. And then
wow,
that went on for 4 or 5 days. And when at the end of that period of time, this animal had gnawed a cone-shaped hole 8 inches deep in the door and about 8 inches diameter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how he got it out of the woodshed. He might have had a pole with a loop of rope on it or something, and pulled him out of there and tied him up, because the second one he caught, he put it in his stove. But trappers have a tin stove. It's about 16 by 18 inches and maybe 3 feet long. You can put limbs in it. It's made out of tin. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't using it as a stove. He had his meat cast in it, and he had it hauled up in a tree with a rope. So he lowered it down, dumped his meat out, and stuck the Wolverine in there. So, well, and then finally the 4th day or 5th day, I guess he caught another one, and he tied it to its stick. So he had the nose and the one leg tied up and the tail and everything. And you could push it in front of him, and it kept trying to turn around on the stick, and it was growling at him. And so he put the one in the stove, put it on tied it up and put it on his pack, and then pushed the one on a stick in front of him. And then they had another, I guess he had the stove on the sled. And so that's what he did. He put the stove on the sled and drug it behind him. It was 18 miles into Cordova. You have a choice, either walking across the ice or the railroad bridge, the old dilapidated bridge. Mm. And anyway, they didn't have TV in those days in the 1929, 28. And so town's kids would see somebody coming, staggering around. He's really tired, been up for 2 days or 3 days, and pushing his Wolverine on his stick, dragging one on his sled, and one growling on his pack. And got into town. The whole town's there looking at these creatures and marveling at them. And he left one out on the sled in his pack, set it on the sled, and he left him out there and walked into the hotel to find Doc Chase. Mm-hmm. And they walked upstairs with this Wolverine shoving it in front of him, knocked on the door, and Doc opens the door, and he shoves it in through the door in the crack, and he locks the door behind him and says to Doc, "Now, I brought you 3 live Wolverines. Now pay me, you so-and-so." But he didn't use those words.
Oh, that's funny.
And Doc says, "Well, just write you a check." "No checks," he says. "It's got to be cash." "Well, I'll just run over the bank." "No, you do. I'll turn this Wolverine loose in here," he says. And so he hollered out of the window, and of course the banker is out there on the street too, from the Cordova, Alaska bank. And he just laughed and went across the street and got $2,700. That was big money in 1928. You could buy a lot of stuff for $2,700.
Right.
So,
that's pretty.
So he went down to Washington, Marysville, Washington, and bought a Curtis Wright Jr. airplane and only had enough money for one lesson. But he made it to Alaska somehow. It had large wings and it could glide real well. And he made money by giving people rides to various canneries. He could lay on the beach and get gasoline money and made it back to Cordova. And then he was hauling dynamite for the mines. He could land on the mountaintops for that Curtis Wright Jr. and got contracts to haul dynamite, and he had to figure out a way to drop them from his planes. If you flew into the mountain, the wooden boxes would break. They pulverize the dynamite. So if you flew away from the mountain, it'd roll down there, and the miners couldn't find it. So he devised a way where you could put two of those 50-pound boxes of dynamite in a gunny sack. He had two of these big gunny sacks in his little plane. We could reach behind him and roll them out over the side and drop it on a side hill and circle around. And the boxes break in the sack, but they could retrieve all the dynamite that way, see. So there's many mines on all the mountains around Valdez, and he was hauling dynamite. He couldn't haul enough to keep them satisfied, so he gave all the contracts to Bob Reeves, and Bob Reeves was starting an airline service. He later created Revolution Airlines, and they were flying jets to Dutch Harbor, big, 727s, twin-engine jet aircraft, and four-engine Constellations later. But back in 1929, he was just starting out as a passenger commercial pilot. So he had a Fairchild 51, which is six-place airplane, I guess. And he was landing on skis on the mud flats. There's books out about on Bob Reeves. They had really pretty daughters. They were stewardesses on these planes later when I was a teenager. Boy, they were pretty girls. Anyway, he gave the contracts to Bob Reeves, and he showed him what he was doing, and they hired this kid. His name Bill Egan. Tied a rope around his waist, and the kid would shove the dynamite out of the door of this Fairchild, and so he wouldn't fall out. He had the rope on him, so circle over the mines and kick it out of there. Well, Bill Egan became governor of Alaska many years later.
Wow.
His parents owned a store in Valdez, you see. So Roosevelt closed all the mines down, bankrupted the entire country, and fixed it and so they could have World War II, and allowed the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. They put all their aircraft carriers in the South Pacific so they were out of harm's way, and all the good ships, and they left all the old junk from World War I in the harbor there. That was just murder. Yep. It was like, and he knew they were going to bomb there, and there was advance warning, and even the radar they had there, they wouldn't acknowledge the incoming aircraft. So It was just massacred.
It's terrible.
So my dad, he flew over to Seldovia, and the U.S. Marshal saw this young guy on an airplane and hired him right away and deputized him. Nice. They had to round up everybody, and all the miners had to go become soldiers, fight in the war, kill Japanese, whatever. And they had the war effort going on. You couldn't get anything useful shipped up to Alaska anymore. Everything went to the war effort, you see. They wanted to make the people feel like they had to contribute. It was a huge brainwashing campaign. They had to save every little bit of gum wrapper and tin cans and everything the ladies did, and the school children would save their little foil so they could melt it down or whatever, make bullets.
That's wild. Are you there? Where'd you go, Henry? Oh, I just lost Henry, darn it. Henry, can you hear me? I think I lost Henry. So it sounds like he's still online. Can you hear me, Henry? We have to call him back, everybody. That's an interesting story he's telling. Oh, hang on. Let me try and call him back. Henry, can you hear me? I wonder if his battery went. Here, let me try him again, everybody. Henry has a lot of good information. I really enjoy him. I hope you all, too, enjoy him as well. Hello? It's ringing. Hello? Henry, can you hear me? Henry? I don't hear anything. Henry, are you there? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. It's ringing and nothing when he answers. That's interesting. I'll try one more time. All right. Just bear with me, everybody. I'm trying to get a hold of Henry again. Looks like I'm thinking that his battery must have died, but I'm not sure. Hang on. I know he was out in his car.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. What happened?
I have no idea. I could hear you very well. You were real clear, but you couldn't hear me apparently.
No, I couldn't hear you twice, so I had to. Well, three's a charm. There you go. That was an interesting story you were sharing with us, and yeah, I thought maybe your battery was dying.
Well, no, the battery's fine. But anyway, they had they saved all their tin cans. They cut the ends out and flattened them out, and then all the bar soap. My mother used to put it in a jar and put water in there and dissolve it down, and use it for laundry detergent later. You see, it just little saving things that they had to do because they wanted them to feel patriotic and contributing to the war effort. And they had a chrome mine near Seldovia, and the company, rich people they had a lot of power with Congress. I guess they need chrome for rifle barrels for hardening and make them rust-proof. And so it was strategic ore body up there. It's about 20 miles up on the mountain above Seldovia. After the war started, they had to round up everybody first. My daddy, there were people that from Norway and Sweden and Finland and Russia and all over the world. They come to the little fishing village and just get off the boat and just live there. Excuse me. Anyway, they were just foreign nationals, and you couldn't have a war with all these people around. You had even Japanese folks and Filipinos, and so my dad had to round them all up, and they put them in jail and figure out who they were. To get papers from them, get addresses and stuff, and either ship them off or turn them into soldiers. And they had to stand watch as night watchman in the jail, and my daddy would play the banjo for him and sing and whatever.
That's nice.
Anyway, all that metal that they collected for the war effort after the war, they put it on a barge. They had no way to process that stuff. They just took it out to sea and dumped it.
Man.
And same thing with the mercury mine. They had Elmer Rasmussen. He was a banker in Anchorage, but he formed a mercury mine up near in Bristol Bay on a river called Alignagik. It's by Dillingham, north of Dillingham. And they took all that mercury ore and took it out to sea and dumped it.
Yeah.
But there was a tremendous amount of war effort, tremendous waste of money that went into the war effort. And then there was a lot of it just wasted, thrown away. I guess wars are that way. They're just very wasteful.
Right.
Whenever you have, the price of oil goes up because the military takes half all the oil produced or more. So that's what you got to look forward to. You probably can't drive anywhere. Be either hitchhiking or riding a horse again for a while.
Right. Or something else, or a bicycle. Yeah, depending on where you live, I guess. Yeah. This is interesting. What about, I was going to ask you about the grid insofar as, do you ever have any concerns about the grid going down? I know you have your own backup generator and all that, but are you ever concerned about the grid itself going?
It's possible that you can get a CME. That's happened before that would knock out the entire grid of the United States. It's a coronal mass ejection from the sun. It happened in the 1880s, I guess, and all the telegraph lines melted. Some of the guys were electrocuted in the telegraph stations. That's what they hear anyway. I'm not sure on that one, but it could happen. And supposedly, if you drop a nuclear bomb over the central part of the United States, it will wipe out about 75% of all the phone lines or communication, all the power lines
Mm-hmm.
from the EMP. But I'm not concerned about it here myself. I use generators and solar cells,
Mm-hmm. I like the solar cells. How are those working out?
I installed 2 today. I got 2 wired up. I ordered 4 of them from Home Depot, and they got 50 watters now, and they're only 2 foot by 2 foot. They put out 50 watts. I got 4 of those, and they're about, they were $500 for 4 of them. That included the chargers.
Mm-hmm.
And the chargers, I didn't really need the chargers because the existing regulator chargers that I have will handle them a lot, up to 10 amps. But I'm wiring up their chargers that came with them. Next time I'll just buy the stupid solar cells and use my own chargers. But they don't put big enough screws on the back of them, and you got huge wire and little bitty ends to put on there, and they don't fit. You have to file them down before you can even put them on the back of the charger. It's very frustrating, and then
mm-hmm.
very slow process.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, but they still work out, though. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I'll need more battery backup, actually, but I only have about 1,200 watts of solar power, but I had to run a generator today because there's no sun today. It's rained, so
mm-hmm.
That's not a big deal. Generator I have only burns about a gallon. So I get a light bill is equivalent to about $2.50 a day.
Wow.
Which should be like $70 or $80 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what it was when I was hooked to the grid over in Kenai. We had a duplex over there, but it was about the same cost, but it was running 80 or more sometimes, a month.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in Washington State, you can have $30, $40, $50 light bills. Some places where you got hydropower. We have hydropower here, but it's not adequate. They're draining the lake there below the lake. And there's other places they could have hydropower here, but it's supposedly a co-op, but it's the way they're operate, they have to hire everybody that's union,
mm-hmm.
to work on the power lines or whatever. So it becomes quite expensive to run a utility.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was wondering how high the electric bills would be up there, as far as just what they charge.
I forget what it is. It's per kilowatt. I don't remember. It's
mm-hmm.
16 cents, I think, around there, somewhere 17 cents a kilowatt.
Well, it's better to live off the grid if you can, I would imagine. I mean, do what you can to live as closely off the grid if you could.
The Siri Corporation, it's a large native corporation in Anchorage, a regional one. They put up a series of giant windmills on Fire Island, which is near Anchorage out in the inlet there. And they spent many millions of dollars on these windmills, and they want to sell their electricity for the retail price, but the local utility doesn't want to buy it. They want to buy it for half of that. They want to buy it for around 8 cents a kilowatt, or less.
Mm-hmm.
And they need 16 or 17 cents in order to make it viable.
Mm-hmm.
But that could change if the price of oil goes up and the local utilities run out of natural gas or whatever, the oil. There's a gas field that they generate most of their power up near Anchorage. They've been gas wells across the Kinnick Arm there that have been furnishing electric power for many years, this
mm-hmm.
tremendous gas supply.
Well.
We've had 8 blowouts here in Cook Inlet from various oil wells. One of the earlier ones caught fire near Anchorage, and the airlines were using it as a beacon for about 8 years. You couldn't put it out, just a big Roman candle burning there.
Mm-hmm.
How many million cubic feet of natural gas was burned up there. Who knows? I mean, it's really
Wow.
hard to tell.
Yeah.
I think they've destroyed or released more than they've ever sold here. There's
Mm-hmm.
the hazards of the technology. The pressure is so great. It's many thousands of pounds per square inch. It just blows up alongside the oil rig, and they can't put it out if it caught fire. The grayling platform didn't catch fire, but it blew 1,200 feet into the air, tidewater, about over 1,000-foot geyser of water for about a week, and it simmered down to 500 feet above the rig after a week, and it was a month before they could put it out.
Oh, man.
I put pictures of that in my book about my dad. Near the end of the book, there's some photographs of the geyser. So in order to put it out, they had to get divers down in that zero visibility water and put explosives around the pipe or something to close it off, and then they have to pump mud down there, kind of seal it off some way. And after the pressure is released to where they can do that.
Mm-hmm. That's not easy.
One of the, it's a waste of energy, tremendous waste, just we need to find other sources of energy.
Oh, I agree.
And I'm using solar for my, house. I don't have a light bill.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
I'm not connected to the grid in any way, and I buy gasoline for my generator. That's my only expense.
Mm-hmm.
But I can walk away from it any time. I don't have to call the power company and shut the power off, and I don't have a monthly bill.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. That's great. I think most people should do that, actually. I just don't understand why they suck it up and deal with these electric companies.
Well, I'm just used to living that way because we have the same setup across Cook Inlet and my fish camp, see? So it's no big deal. It's, kind of enjoy that lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
We got all the amenities, we got a big pressure pump in our bathroom for taking showers. You turn that on, it's 220 volts over there, and it works great.
Mm-hmm.
Propane water heater, 100 gallon, I think. It's a big one anyway, 80 gallons. And a bank of batteries, so when you don't have the generator running, you just turn on a 3,000 watt inverter, and you got lights for a while, 6 or 8 hours of lights.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not bad. Well, I think at some point in the continuum, people are going to have to be a little more resourceful when it comes to their lifestyles. I think it's good to be prepared for anything,
Well, we could probably survive all right, but there'd be a lot of havoc going on.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I like the remodeling you were doing, and of course, if people follow your website or actually your Facebook page, they'd be able to see some of that. That's pretty cool.
It's all right. Yeah. My wife wanted a porch. I just didn't want to build it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then I just finally got firewood out of the way and got everything out of there so we could do it. I had room to build it. So.
Oh, I'm glad your hip's doing well too. I know the last time you were on the show, you were getting ready to have the surgery, so that went well, and so seems like they're moving.
Yeah,
correct.
that cost. My hospital bill was $184,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's in the Soldotna Hospital here. And the Heritage House, I had to stay 10 days in there. They required it as part of my Medicare. So, and they have these bicycle machines. You work out 20 minutes twice a day and on those and other things. You learn how to use a walker and all that other good stuff. That I've been running around all summer now and fishing and running the boat and everything and climbing ladders and falling trees in the backyard and cut up 2 big trees here recently and working on things around the house here.
That's awesome.
So once you get the operation done, you just eliminate all the pain. You can go back to doing things that you were doing before. It works pretty good, but
yeah, it's great.
I was hoping that they'd allow stem cell research or something, so we just inject some of the stem cells in there and rebuild the cartilage. But George Bush put the nay, stop that operation, so you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and I can't afford to fly to some foreign country and have it done and pay for it. But so you're dependent on the government to pay for it, Medicare and insurance.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And Henry, we're about ready to wrap this up. I can't believe we have about 2 minutes here. I just want to thank you so much. But if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that if they want to contact you? And your websites again.
Well, just go on the websites. I have my address on there. Can write letters or order books that way too. And I have some that I run off at the UPS store and bind them up with a ring binder. And it's guarddogbooks.com or alaskapublishing.com. Or you can also find me, just type in Hank Kroll, HankKroll, or Henry Kroll into Google, and my websites will pop up. And some of the articles that I've written and many of the things on the climate change, and all of that stuff will show.
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a bit of information there. Then, I've had did some tremendous amount of study and work on this stuff over the years, especially that one book that's Cosmological Ice Ages, about where we're going and where we came from in space.
Mm-hmm. It's a great book. Yeah.
And the light source and the light source that made the energy on this planet wasn't the sun. The energy, the sun couldn't break through the thick atmosphere.
Right. And Henry, we're just about
hundreds of pounds per square inch.
And we're going to have that discussion again. Henry, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunter and Mickey. Coming up next to sell you on tonight from Down Under, as they always do with their excellent show. Thanks again, Captain Henry Kroll. It was a pleasure to have you on tonight. You take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.